Happy spot to not be anything good.
Well, when you talk is when it turns to you. So no happy spot. But
That's intimidating.
I know, I'm sorry. It's the best for giving folks the virtual option as well. State law says we have to do a virtual meeting in addition to any in-person now for public meetings.
Since when?
About a year or two ago.
Occurred during COVID and then they made it permanent
Mhm.
coming out of COVID.
We'll give folks another minute or two and then we'll get started. You want a copy, paper copy for yourself? Okay. Anna, do you want a paper copy? Perfect.
We've had 10 years to prepare.
I suppose. Do we have anybody?
Actually lived for OC for 7 years and then came back. So, yeah, I used to run the experimentation and more of. Came back 3 years ago.
I think we're waiting for Wade. Okay. I thought you'd be one of the first ones here.
Yeah. Yeah, I really updated that place. I mean, after we had like $1.1 million in our endowment fund. We started buying and upgrading. So made a pretty nice station when I left. Can't handle the politics anymore. I'm gonna turn my email on. Oh my word. That's a cool place.
I think we got a chair right here for you. Don't trip over the cords.
Close to the front.
There is no front. It's a fancy 360 camera, so. Okay.
How are you?
You started recording. Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. If you don't know me, I'm Sunny Summers. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Department of Ag. I work in the director's office. I've been with ODA for 20 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. I don't know about you all, but where the heck does 20 years go? And I get a lot of the doesn't fit well in other parts of the agency projects. So canola is one of my projects. I have my coworker Charlotte Campbell here with me. She's going to help us run the virtual piece. And the order of show for today is going to be, I'm going to do a roll call for invited RAC members. We are recording this meeting because that is our minutes and that will be posted on our rulemaking webpage. So if you or anybody else that you're working with wants to go back and listen to the meeting, you'll have that available to you probably in a couple of days. This is a public meeting, but only invited RAC members are asked to provide feedback today. If folks have feedback that you come up with later, or if you're not an invited RAC member, then we ask that you email rulemaking@oda.oregon.gov. That comes straight to me, and that way I can keep track of comments that are coming in. Bathrooms are down the hall and to the left, as well as a drinking fountain. Exits, I feel like an airline stewardess, the door you just came in, there's also one that goes out the back of the building that direction, and then obviously this one here too. So we have a few points of egress. At the end, after we go through these rules, I'm going to ask you what the cost for compliance is going to be, if you have any thoughts on that. If you don't, and you come up with them later, I want to hear them. That's part of the filing paper work that we do with the Secretary of State. So basically, we're gonna go through these draft rules. You're gonna give me feedback and say, Sunny, you're crazy. What the hell are you thinking? Or yes, we like that. And then we'll take that input. I then file these rules with the Oregon Secretary of State. That opens the formal public comment period, which allows people to write comments, anybody. Or we'll probably hold a virtual meeting for anybody who wants to provide verbal comments on the rules. Once that closes, we take those comments into account and decide, like, you know, sometimes people give me comments that I'm like, that's not even part of the rules. Thank you for participating. And then the director has the final decision on whether or not we file the rules as permanent. So we're probably, in a perfect world, I would get these in the May 1st bulletin. And I have to notify the legislature 49 days, no sooner than 49 days before we adopt the rules. So my goal is to get these in place by the end of June, so that anybody, first part of July, so that anybody who wants to plant this fall will know what the heck the rules are. So thank you for your patience. I know this has been, as Carrie's saying, 10 years. For me, it's been about 3. Originally, the Clouds had asked for a change in the protected district. I don't think he realized what he was asking, and so it started this process. So anybody, just as an FYI, if you don't know, anybody can petition a state agency to change their rules. So that's what kind of started my involvement in this. Most of you in this room know we have 4 protected districts in Oregon related to brassicas. 3 of them were created by the department. The one in the Willamette Valley was created by the state legislature. So ODA doesn't have a lot of ability or flexibility with that one. You've heard me say, we can't really create a new protected district like the current Central Oregon Protected District. Our understanding of our statutory authority today is different than when folks before me put the original one into place. What we can do, however, is protect edible rapeseed, low uric acid rapeseed, from other crops. So what we're proposing here is to remove Deschutes and Crook County and create a new Jefferson County Protected District that basically is around protecting edible varieties of rapeseed from other brassicas. So that's kind of the background, how we got to where we are. I'm going to start with that roll call, and then we'll get into the meat of the rules, if that works for folks. Okay. Gary Bishop, Kevin Richards, Jeremiah Dunn,
Here.
Kyle Bender,
Here.
Ken Stout, Eric Utter,
Yes.
thank you. Carrie Baxton, okay. Wade Flagel,
Yes.
Tim DeBoot, and Kenny Smith.
Here.
Okay,
Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
no worries. And can you tell us your name?
I'm Steve Coleman.
Oh, I've met you online.
Yeah, hi.
Do you have a copy, Steve, or would you like a copy?
I'd like to copy.
Perfect. And we have Anna Scharf and Mark Keeley. Thank you. Okay. Well, if Carrie's pulling in, maybe we'll give him a second to come in.
And just to be clear, we're just talking about, well, Central Oregon Protected District today, nothing about any of the other protected districts.
Correct. However, some of the rules apply to all of the protected districts, like the definitions. So we're adding in some definitions in the general definitions rule, because that will affect what we do in the new Jefferson Protected
And
District.
the definitions will be applicable to all
Correct.
protected districts.
Yeah. So yeah, there's kind of some general rules that apply for the protected districts. Plus we have the statewide rule that says you have to have tarped loads, you have to control stuff around your field, the plant back restrictions, those apply statewide, regardless of whether you're in a protected district or not. So I included, I think, those in here just for conversation, that general production area, but we're not anticipating making any changes to that. So just where you're seeing the blue or the red. And then I've listed the other ones so you can understand why the numbers are out of order. But for example, the one on the Idaho border, I think that one's in place because Idaho has a protected district and there's folks within 3 miles across the river. The northeastern one, not 100% sure on that. And you're clear?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. We're just getting started. There's no head of the table, so you can belly up to the bar. Okay, so we're gonna go through these, and Charlotte has them up on the screen as well. I don't know if we have anybody online.
Not yet.
Okay, so just in case. So let's start, just for Carrie. We are looking to repeal the current Central Oregon Protected District and create a Jefferson County only protected district. And that would pull Deschutes and Crook County out because that's what folks asked me to do. Besides the folks who were like, just get rid of it completely. We have a whole body of rules for all the protected districts. A couple of them, like the definitions, are going to need to be updated, but some of them are in here just so people know what the whole body of rules is. So this first one, 860, gives a description of what this body of rules are. And again, ODA's authority for the COPD, the Northeastern and the Malheur protected districts really is around protecting edible varieties of rapeseed from other higher erucic acid crops. And so this overview has been updated to reflect that. So I'll stop there. If there's any comments on the language in there that folks want to make.
Regulate the types of rapeseed species, so what does that mean exactly?
Well, that's statutory language. So I think, again, we could regulate if somebody was to be growing industrial varieties, we can create that separation between the low erucic acid and the high erucic acid. So that's our authorizing authority.
Does that include GM and not
Yeah.
GM?
Yeah.
It could. ODA has, as you know, kind of shied away from that conversation. At this point, we're not including that, but we could require those separation.
So just on his comment about GM, canola that is Roundup ready is a no bueno. And they are having issues in Canada and everywhere that I travel with that. If it comes here, we're gonna have wild mustard like in the valley along the highways.
Yeah, I understand that.
That's a little word there that could be,
I think, ODA doesn't regulate any other GM crop. And if it has been deregulated by the USDA, we would not put any restrictions in unless the legislature told us to.
Okay.
That has been our stance to date. Yeah, it's not one I can change at this point.
Okay.
So.
The language, I guess you're saying the language would allow the department to.
I think it would, but we have chose not
But
to.
you've never done.
Correct. Yeah. And that would be above my pay grade. Hopefully for a very long time above my pay grade. So the next one, the 861 General Production Area Protected Districts, that's just included so that you know the sequence. We're not proposing to make any changes to that rule. The next one is the definitions. Because we are adding a new protected district, we're looking to repeal the current one, which means you get rid of that number, the way the OARs work. And so that's that first part there you see where it says apply to OAR 603. That's just being clear about which rules these definitions apply to. We tend to use the term brassica and not always brassicaceae. So the person that was drafting these for me just included that in there. I know brassicaceae is the more scientifically correct term, but we tend to use brassica a lot. So moving on to page,
And has that always included radish?
yes. That is not a change. Because we're proposing pinning here at the extension office, we added the definition of designated office. It'll make sense later in the rules.
I have a comment about that.
Yep,
Technically, we have extension here at the Ag Experiment Station. But in the past, the extension office has been at other locations
okay, so we need to clarify.
and they could just be 4-H, so if it's gonna be the research station, that's gonna be the designated office, yeah, we need.
Okay.
Pinning's always been here though, right? As far as-
Yes. That's correct. But, the extension component of has not always been.
That makes perfect sense.
Pinning maps used to be down at Deer or D Street, didn't it? In the old extension office?
For my time.
No, I think they used to be down. Wow, yeah.
There'd just be some public confusion if things
Yeah.
change.
No, we'll update that and probably I think we can include the address as well so that it's really clear which facility. So, thank you. Field history, again, that gets into some priority pieces later. So trying to define that. Isolation distance is not a new definition, but clarifying that it's the minimum physical distance between crops. Moving on to page 3, pinning. Again, that'll make more sense later in the rules. So any other questions or comments on the definitions piece?
Is there gonna be more discussion about how specific planting date is, because oftentimes that's not.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
So I just want to comment, this definition of pinning kind of assumes that you're always gonna physically come to the office to physically pin. There's never gonna be an electronic thing.
I think I could argue that if the designated office were to create a digital map, that would work. But let me make a note of that.
We have pinned on behalf of growers through a phone call. The location given.
Okay, so the next one, the general production area, again, this is just a reminder, because when we start talking about protected districts, I think sometimes we forget that there are statewide rules that require planting certified seed or treated seed that is blackleg free, cleaning your equipment, making sure that you meet the plant back restrictions, control volunteers, and that regardless, any of the protected districts are in addition. The rules in those are in addition to these statewide rules. So just wanted to make sure folks had those in place. And we're aware of those, because sometimes that comes up when we have conversations about protected districts. Rule 880. Again, we are looking to repeal the current Central Oregon Protected District and would add this new Jefferson County Protected District. So that's basically all that is happening there. And then the next rules are the Willamette Valley, which again is by legislative. We would get rid of the current Central Oregon Protected District, which means we lose that number. We would maintain the Northeastern and the Malheur. And then there's some research summary. I don't even remember exactly what's in that rule, but not proposing to make any changes. And then we would get into the new protected district. That would be by county line. So, bless the legislature, but the one in the Willamette Valley makes you crazy if you don't have GIS people working on it. So just the county line here is what we're, and it would be for all brassica crops. Because how do you know if you're protecting the low from the high if you don't pin all brassica crops? However, folks doing home gardening like me, don't look at the mustard in my front yard. I know when I came over before, we talked about folks using it in the in-between rows in vineyards. And some of the nematicide effects that can have.
Is that here or is that more valley?
There were some folks over here that said they were doing that. I don't remember which county.
I remember it coming up, but I don't remember where.
So we just kind of said that we're not so worried about. So unless people have heartburn about that, that's what that was looking at.
I think there's maybe more use in this area as a cover crop. And I think that could be something we could talk about at the
Right.
time.
Yeah. I mean, this might be the appropriate time. I know the Northeastern Protected District allows it to be grown for forage or cover as long as it doesn't go to bloom. So I don't know if that is something that folks in Jefferson County would like to see in these rules. I think that we might be hard pressed to have the statutory authority to do it though, because that's not a problem from a urusic acid standpoint, but I could certainly look into it if that's something that folks felt really strongly about.
Well, the urusic acid issue is a pollination issue. So if you let it go to flower, then it becomes a pollination issue.
Right. That's why I'm thinking maybe.
So the growers in NorCal, they top it, so they don't have an issue,
Mhm.
but it's just from my clients, you would be hard pressed to have them go through the vineyard and top it because of cost.
Right. I think we're more thinking the forage or cover cropping,
Which goes to bloom.
unless you go through and top it. And is that reasonable in Jefferson County?
I would think not, but necessarily speak for the entire grower base, but I don't think anyone's gonna be interested in topping
Their forage, yeah.
But they are interested in growing it into flower,
That's-
which then you have the most pest control properties when it goes in this green. So
Do we know what the species is if it's ingrown as the cover crop?
So the three cover crops that I do are for a three-way. And it's all about different, either root depth or plant height. And so you got radish, kale, Ethiopian cabbage, chicory and things like that. So those are the primary ones. There's 5 different types of kale we use. So and it doesn't readily bloom. We don't use the ones that readily bloom that. It's more of a capture the bugs and eat stuff.
And let's be honest, while the department's authority is to protect the low urusic acid, this is a marketing thing. And the canola folks would be less concerned about those crops going to seed next to their canola, I would imagine. Than,
As long as we're not growing certified seed.
right,
We're growing seed to replant, then you can't have.
right, then you need your isolation distances.
Yeah, I think in this area, they're gonna be worked into the ground at bloom and not allowed to go to seed to avoid volunteers. But it would be kind of the isolation distance factor.
So keeping it as the commercial and not specifically calling out forage and cover crops should be okay, is what I'm hearing.
So we have to, so forage and cover crop is a huge one because of the feed value.
Right, but you would be okay pinning it and keeping your 3 mile or whatever isolation distance we come up with from canola. That would still work for folks. We wouldn't need to call it out.
I don't know that you're gonna get cattle in to maintain 3 miles.
How many cattlemen are in Jefferson County right now? I know, we're all the wrong group for that.
Quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, but within the intensive crop areas of Jefferson County,
You got 4 feedlots that are probably 3,000 head apiece.
I know I get 2 or 3.
but how much forage and cover are they growing right there?
I don't have another operation.
Yeah, I can think of 2 or 3 operations that are planning for forage.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, the way this is written now, they would need to pin those crops, but they wouldn't have any restriction on do they harvest it or cut it down before it blooms. So which hoop is worse to jump through? Pinning and just keeping it 3 miles from, and if it's another forage crop, they can work out an isolation agreement, who cares? And they keep it 3 miles from canola, or is it more of a hassle to not pin it, but you have to make sure you get out there and cut it before it blooms?
Or grazing.
Right,
Could like a delayed planting date be something that would work? For a cover crop? Or it would bloom in the summer after the seed crops are done.
Problem is if the guy doesn't irrigate it, it's gonna hold. So. Brassicas are,
they're a squirrely bunch.
I've seen 2 fields side by side, planted the same day that are blooming 15 days apart, so. It's
But they can go from 0 to 100 very quickly.
very.
We've had that
yes.
too, where we've planted some brassica and didn't even know that there was an issue. Quarter-mile away, there's a forage mix blooming, had no clue. It turned yellow just as quick in 2 days.
Yeah,
And so at that point, pollination, the damage is done. So
Forage piece is hard. Cause there's a lot of acres doing it.
If you could identify the species, say you're growing Ethiopian kale, which that's not related to any of these.
No.
And if you're growing another like Oleracea kale, it's not related to any of these.
And turnips and rutabagas are another one they use, Swedes are common forage crop, so. I guess
This would be the turnips and rutabaga.
turnips and rutabagas would be the ones that be harsh. Kales are late, and I don't know of any kale that would be anywhere close to the bloom time in our canola would be. Just don't. Radish is gonna be late. Radishes, how many days apart of your radish bloom? Canola, and they're about the same time plant.
Yeah, about the same time.
Yeah, they're gonna be within,
Each other without an issue,
yeah, they're gonna be within.
because they don't cross pollinate.
Right. And
And that person too.
We'll have, Nebraska Genesea, Alba, those 2 clusters can be used for cover crops too.
think mustards is what I know mix is being used.
Mustards and radish.
And I don't know what specific species they are, maybe Evan or Kevin knows more than I do with that, but. Species.
Okay,
I know their intent is to let it bloom at some level and then work it in.
I mean, I think you have to bloom to get that nematicide property, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in the current regulation, it would require all those to be pinned.
correct. If it's for commercial purposes, I would say forage or cover crop is a commercial purpose.
And isolation's only from edible canola.
That's what we get to decide that part too. But yes,
Well, it sounds like pinning is not a major effort of someone to notify you where it's gonna be done, as opposed to ignorance is bliss. That's probably better off to know.
well, and to be honest, it's a hell of a lot better than what's currently in place if people were actually following it. You know,
Well, and there's a lot of people that just don't care either, you know, and I've been down that road several times where you follow all the rules and people just don't care. They're gonna do it, and then when you try to go after them, it's a bankruptcy and you're chasing a bankruptcy anyways to try to get your loss out of it.
these rules will have enforcement, but those others didn't necessarily have
I
to.
can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I know. So I'm hoping that that will help some of that too. And being just Jefferson County, hopefully that will make it a little bit easier. I'm not Pollyanna to believe that people won't still do whatever the heck they want to do. So let's leave it this way for now, that it's included, and we can revisit that at the end or later if we need to. Moving on to the pinning map and isolations. So to facilitate communication and implementation relative to production of brassica or brassica specialty seed, we're gonna work with OSU to, we say web-based map. I don't know if that's right. Maybe we should just say a map and you all can figure out if it is a web-based or physical map on the wall here in the research station.
Does the research station have a virtual map yet?
No, still on paper.
I've used Google Earth, which I think is why this ended up saying web-based, because Renee was like, oh, well, you could use Google Earth and then you can see it digitally. That's what I've done in the past for research pins in the protected district. But I think I would like to just take it out and give you guys the flexibility to do what works best, if everybody's okay with that. Okay. So we're pinning rapeseed and other brassica crops relative to each other. Moving on to page 6.
Brassica specialty seed crops under this definition back there,
Correct,
but just rapid, not facing against here.
correct. 1 year map from June to June. I don't know enough to know if that's the right dates. That's loosely based on what we have in the valley. And then using last year's map to kind of establish that historical use priority.
So June to June, we have an overlap because the planting is gonna start 1st of May for all canola here,
Okay.
for spring, sorry.
Right.
For fall, it's gonna be September,
Mhm.
so. Listen,
By June, in theory, folks know what they're going to be doing in September. And could put a pin on a map. And that gives you July, August to work out any conflicts. I think that's the idea.
Okay.
Does that make sense to folks? Are we completely off base there?
Well,
June to June is the overlap. So somebody could tie up ground by pinning June so that I can't plant 3 miles away. Even though they're not gonna plant. Somebody could prevent me from planting. Is that true?
That says in here, you can't pin to hold.
Well, if it's a June to June, you're pinning to hold. Cause I can't plant in May on a spring canola crop if it's covered till June.
A lot of people aren't gonna make a decision until September, because we're going into 2027, not looking very promising.
Right.
So, and some farmers, I'm looking at putting quite a bit in. If the water's not looking good next year, because maybe we
Get
only
something.
get something.
Yeah.
So that decision probably won't be till really 1st September. Put it in. If somebody goes around it.
Maybe if you could explain the difference between the June to June pinning map and then looks like there's
Annuals and biennials.
there's the deadline for annuals. So if you want to spring plant for canola, you have to pin it on March 1st is how I'm reading this. And then fall planting, and then by August 1st, what's the difference between those deadlines outlined there and the map here?
Yeah, I think. I wish I had asked Renee to join us. I think she copied this kind of from WVSSA's rules.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so maybe, maybe you can answer the question you just asked, Kenny.
It's with our map, it's more of this is more of like a function of the map of just clearing old pins out.
Mhm.
It's not really like a deadline. That's the June to June. I think ours July to July, but anyway,
Okay,
that's more of a mechanical function of the map, just clearing old pins out. But if you had an isolation that someone hadn't, and no one else was growing in that area, it would just clear out by that time.
okay,
I think that might be consistent with the way this reads, so. Is there 2 pinning dates, and then the map clears on June 21st?
Right.
But yeah,
That's how,
that's inconsistent with what was being commented on before. So actually, if you're gonna plant in September, you have till August 1st to pin.
right,
If you're gonna plant in the spring, you have till March 1st to pin.
Yeah.
But the map resets on the 21st. Pretty clean slate. on the
So-
21st.
21st of June, 2026 would clear out the pin that's held from, say, by March 1st, 2025, which is old
Yeah,
stuff.
if you haven't planted your spring crop, you're longer.
for priority purposes, you wouldn't have anything.
Well, that field would be grown and planted and harvested by then. It's just that physical pin wouldn't be on the map anymore.
Right,
Maybe part of that first, number 2 is maybe strike through, since you cover it with the resetting the map on the 21st. Pinning dates of March 1 and August 1, do you really need to describe the June to June thing? Because it does add confusion to,
right.
if you stop reading and don't go to the,
If you're not using an electronic pinning map, I don't see the point. I think just strike it, like you said.
And for number 3, if you're pinning in August 1st to plant, well, I guess you're harvesting next year.
Right, so that's the
But-
map here.
I think the
On the
June,
spring
you're
plant.
right to think striking that first June to June completely and just relying on the March and August.
Okay, and then we can put something, about we can make that historical use priority make more sense about whatever was on the map for the crop year prior to June 21st is the historical use priority for the immediate past year. So we can clarify that language.
I think too, our current pinning system has its own priority rules for It's for brassica seed crops.
Your pinning system is not state regulated,
But does this,
fit with that.
Apologies if I'm here. There's nothing here, at all. That regulates planting date.
Correct.
And I understand that it would use your authority, to regulate planting date. But because, of the, coexistence issue for us in Jefferson County, is it feasible to have one pinning date instead of two? So that would be August 1st for annuals and biennials.
I think so. I think that just depends on what folks in Jefferson County want.
So, in that scenario, there would be a much bigger runway to ensure coexistence with crop, other pollinating species than issue.
We cannot regulate for pollinating with other species.
I understand.
And I don't think that we can say you can only do fall planted,
You're really talking about having a single pinning date.
so that you know early on where things might be.
Exactly. So basically, what they would do, it would kind of harmonize it with our existing seed pinning policy. And allow for better communication, all the languages, more fundamental coexistence.
What do other folks think about that?
So the person's gonna pin. Say they have a canola crop, they pin it before August 1st, and then they can fall or spring plant it without isolation, is that what you're saying?
That's my question or suggestion.
But if someone decides in November that they wanna spring plant it.
They
just
So
fail it.
here's the scenario that's going on in my head, and this has happened twice in Oregon. The fall plant. And we have -14 for 5 days and the fall plant is dead.
So
Guys on the horn. Not less than a month later, entertaining planting spring, no. And so I don't know that single
Well, if it's the same field, you've got that pin regardless.
may or may not be the same field. That's
Right.
What we run into. Spring is a different critter, fall. So, has different,
Yeah, but I think she's talking about if the field freezes out, they already have the pin that crop's going in there, so if they want to spring plant it, they could. And back into the same field. They're not
That would be-
changing fields.
Not a problem. If you decide you needed to change fields, you would not have that option under what Kevin's proposing.
I know you stated you can't regulate pollinators, but how do we define economic conflicts?
That's the moral of the story, right?
What was that, Jeremiah, did you hear about?
How do we define agronomic conflicts?
Minimizing agronomic conflicts, ensure. Yeah,
So there's no way we could put in this where no spring planting. Is that? So I think that's the biggest conflict
right.
with everybody, that we would. Because if we go August 1st, we don't know what the water, we may not have enough water to even get it out of the ground. But then you're gonna be forced to go into the spring.
Mhm.
So can we put it where they can make a decision in October? If we get some fall rains and stuff. Or people are just gonna go around and pin. And see what the outlook is for this winter and what the water situation is. Most, well, I can only speak for myself, but it's usually 1st September I start deciding. How low is the reservoir, what.
How bad is the snowpack?
Yeah.
How many frogs are,
Right, but I wish we could put something in there where
no spraying would be allowed. I think that would cost, because I think everybody's really neighborly, but there was one person last year that kind of gave everybody the middle finger
Right.
and nothing was ever done with him.
Left a bad taste in all of our mouths.
Yeah, did. So I think if we could figure out a way, my biggest concern is doing a spring, because I think that would keep peace in the family, especially with the carrot folks that are raising carrots, and I think that's why some of them are here. That, I don't. The spring doesn't produce, I don't feel it produces enough to be economical, but I've never done it. I'd like to do a test plot. I was talking to Evan this morning about it, just out of curiosity. When it blooms, if I could isolate like 10 acres away from everybody and just see what it does, just FYI, but I think that's gonna be a big conflict because sadly, somebody's gonna do it.
Yeah.
There's no stopping it. It could damage the neighbors.
So the spring planting is that's all Hampton was. It's all spring planting,
Right, but we're talking
We're here.
Jefferson County.
right here.
So
So
here,
just
this is where
just
the
Jefferson County.
carrot guys are worried, but I don't blame them. And I think the fall, but everybody I've talked to is worried about spring planting canola, and I agree with them. And I can say, well, I'm not gonna buy
What
it,
is the worry, I guess
because when it blooms, it might be close, like it's blooming right now, I'm not aware of, somebody told me, one of the fieldmen said we're what, 40 days ahead.
Early, yeah.
Very early because we had a light winter, but if the spring, if it doesn't start blooming the 1st of July, that's when the carrot guys bring in all their beets. And the beets like canola a heck of a lot better than carrots, I believe. So if they're right across or within 2 miles, it's gonna damage their crop. And carrots are high dollar stuff, they're putting a lot of money.
So canola growers are bringing in their own bees.
What's
You
that?
got canola growers bringing their own bees
I
in.
think it's a more attractive crop. The
Right.
pollination and competition.
We're not trying to pollinate the canola here. We're just growing it for seed.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, we gotta make sure there's no conflict between the carrot growers and the people who wanna do canola seed.
So what's the bloom date on carrot?
It's
Cause
really, well, you guys always, it's first, I always figure the 1st of July or 4th of July, you guys dragging your bees, right? Well, these guys are all carrot guys. I don't know nothing about
Late
carrot.
June.
Except,
so for the most part, canola is done.
you don't know about spring,
For spring planting?
They're worried about the spring plant.
the spring planting, not the fall.
Later.
The latest spring that I've ever planted, now granted, I only deal with one canola company. The latest spring that I've ever planted was a late planting. And we were completely done blooming by July 13th. Because we were worried.
So we'd have bees in by the 3rd week of June often.
Yeah, okay, 4th of July.
I'm trying to inform myself, because I was under the assumption the carrot was way later.
I just feel if we can just figure out a way to know spring, I think that would solve 99% of the problems
In
in Jefferson County.
Jefferson County.
Yeah, right.
And that was most of the public testimony that
Right.
was given the last three public meetings you guys had was
Concerns about pollinator services.
fall is mostly fine, but we're really worried about spring just mostly because of the unknown. And but back to, since you can't regulate pollinators. How can, and maybe it's pinning deadlines, but how can you discourage
Right.
to the greatest extent without coming out and saying it?
Would that one pinning date for fall and spring planting do that? Or would that at least give those of you that grow carrots enough? I'm gonna stay away from that, or I'm gonna plant this field this year instead of this field.
So
Seeing a no.
the question I got, so this is the last day to pin, not the only day to pin.
Correct.
So a deadline means just the last day. So to get to the point of not knowing maybe what you're gonna do until September, maybe the pinning date really ought to be November 1. So that, again, or maybe right before you, maybe it's October 1, because.
You take the month to order seed.
But you're still allowing both the fall, you're still giving some time to think about spring. But if you decided to plant the crop, you can go pin on the 15th of August if you want. You can pin on the 20th of July if you want. It's just the last day to pin, not the only day to pin.
Well, and if ODA copied the rules from WVSFA, this would just be for your priority. So if someone didn't pin their priority pin after March 1st, then a new person could come in and pin
Even if it's after.
on March 2nd.
Well, we could make it last day to
If you
pin,
guys were copying WVSFA.
and I think that's what she was doing. But we could say instead that that's the last day you have to make a decision.
So there's no way to put in this that you cannot grow spring raspberries.
I think we
that
would be,
solve, like I say, I think that would solve, and you can pin up to,
when that was brought up in the meetings that I had before and I went back, I was told no. I can certainly look into that again.
cause I've been asked a couple times if they could do spring, and I just say, well, I'm not gonna buy it from you. 'Cause it's just-
Right.
yeah.
Minimizes those conflicts.
But there's gonna be sadly, probably somebody that might push it
So,
and just don't need it.
Sunny made the comment earlier that our vegetable seed pinning is not, a state regulated pinning process. I think the issue that we're talking about is ODA has some reservations about, regulating things that effectively are more about, coexistence across crops and market access issues and that type of thing. Which is primarily the concern among growers, and that's why we're focused mostly in Jefferson County, because that's where more of the carrot seed is from. In my view, there is a good opportunity to do exactly what Carrie is suggesting, but incorporate it in our, what effectively is a private vegetable seed process. And so someone like Carrie, as a buyer, could commit to that. And so that if I wanted to grow it, I know that Carrie's made that commitment. A spring planted crop is not going to be economically viable. I can't market that crop locally. There's not that many buyers of canola in the whole geography, right? So then to capture those potential buyers is relatively easy. In my experience working on some issues like this related to GMO, you're a private sector mechanism for what we're talking about. You're going to have a little bit more teeth and a little bit more enforcement than something that's state regulated, which I think is what we've experienced in the last couple of years, where technically people were doing what they weren't. I mean, literally, so a couple of growers were doing what they weren't supposed to do, and they were just come back.
Right, and I told him I wasn't gonna buy it from him, and it didn't slow him down at all. I was like, this is crazy. So there's really no enforcement.
But I think if that was formalized, it would have a lot more teeth. You know, your suggestion to them that, no, you can't market that crop.
Cause they'll go somewhere else. It's just. 'Cause I had
His
two
Northwest Grain Growers has an elevator at, not out of
discussions.
Canada. No, it's over,
Pasco.
Ione.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they do receive canola, so there is options economically, is it viable? I guess that's the question. And that's probably gonna dictate more of what happens with the canola. It's not like hemp that people go crazy, but.
Let's put a pin in that. and go to pinning procedures, it may help. I think part of it is actually there. I think the pin is only valid into the following dates, but the last day to pin is actually number 2. Under pinning procedures. So in there, we have pinning requests must be received by X date of each calendar year. So that I think is more of the last day to pin. So this would be, I come into the office, I say, hey, Jeremiah, I want to put a pin here. It has to be between 8 and 5. Jeremiah, you can tell me if that's accurate or not. And then they would date and time stamp. So, Sunny walked in at 4 o'clock on Friday. Tim didn't walk in until Monday at 8 a.m. And so we know Sunny's pin came in before Tim's pin. Make sure you have all of the information that's needed. They're processed in the order that they're received and are complete. I think that's what she means by the endorsed date and timestamp. We can see publicly, the map or whatever, either again, something on the wall or digitally. They're valid for that crop, that location, and the way it's written now, because we have spring and fall, that planting period. You need to tell us who you are, where you are, an email address, a telephone number, what your brassica crop is, the field location, using decimal degrees. Print out a map. This is kind of what we do in the Willamette Valley. And is sitting over there going, yes, I do this all the time. Draw a circle around the field so Bunny or Jeremiah know what the heck you're talking about, your intended planting and harvest dates, any historical planting. If you need to change it, you're changing the type of crop, the acreage, the location, the planting period. That would require a new pin. And then we go into one of the hardest parts for me, which is the figuring out who has priority. Yes. So I'm going to pause there.
So it says brassica, under pinning requests, it says brassica crops. So that would include everything. It's brassica, radish, under definition 2.
Correct.
So we're not so we're talking radish, we're talking someone that's like a kale. Someone's got, I don't know.
Brassica, Sinapis, and Rapis sativus. Grown for commercial crop.
Not just brassica specialty seed.
If it meets that definition. And then looking at.
I just want to be clear, you're talking about ODA is going to regulate the pinning of radish as well.
That is a brassica crop under this definition. If it's grown for commercial purposes. If that doesn't make sense, we can change that for the Jefferson County Protected District. We don't have to go with the whole thing.
This would include cover crops as well.
Yeah.
Forage crops.
Are bidding specialists, Jeremiah, or?
Happened to.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of work for someone.
So what's the enforcement,
We'll get to that.
other than trying?
Sorry. Brassica specialty seed crop. Sorry, it doesn't mean kale if you're not growing it for seed production, so. And maybe I don't know enough about this, but looking at the definition on page 2 at the top, Brassica specialty seed crop means crop of the species Brassica rapa, napus, and Gentiana that may cross-pollinate with canola and are grown for seed production. So pinning map separates into crop groups for pinning rapeseed and Brassica specialty seed crops relative to each other. So it wouldn't include radish.
Okay.
My apologies.
Brassica crops, but it's supposed to say Brassica specialty seed crops.
I think that could be updated, yeah. What number are you looking at?
Number pinning requests under pinning procedures,
Number 3, number 2?
number 2.
Yeah, I think that could be changed to other Brassica seed crops, if that's what folks wanted.
If you take that definition, it's usually a brassica specialty seed crops. Cover crop being thrown out because it's not for seed.
Yeah. It would. And we already have, looking back at the definition, forage brassica is grown for animal or livestock feed and is not allowed to flower. And again, that's because the Northeast, and I think the Ontario one both say you can grow it for forage, but you can't let it flower. This is a local conversation, so I'm really going to be looking at you all for, is it brassica under the definition of brassica, or is it brassica specialty seed crop under that definition that you would want to see in the pinning requests?
So I guess to define, from my point of view, if it was seed, I would write a contract with the farmer. That it is canola seed crop, not, there's no forage crop. And then.
Right.
So that, I mean, that grower is gonna have that letter.
No, I think the idea being we are protecting canola
Right.
from other brassicas that might be high erucic acid. So either industrial rapeseed.
Right.
And we're broadening that to be brassica or brassica specialty seed to do that. And so the question is, should this say brassica crops, which would include your radish, etc., or should it say brassica specialty seed, which would be specific to Rapa, Napus, and Gentiana?
I think we should also keep in mind the specialty seed crops that can't be grown here, because that's been some of the most economically impactful harm that's happened due to rapeseed being here. So it's not necessarily checked in.
The rules, Jeremiah, are protecting low erucic acid from high. And by requiring pinning, then everybody knows what's being grown where. But is it all brassica or is it brassica specialty seed? What makes the most sense for Jefferson County?
All brassica.
Because we have a pinning system that, isolates, is in theory, brassica seed crops. And, so it's how does canola fit into the mix?
So your current pinning system, which everybody is familiar with, uses covers all breast.
No, it covers brassica specialty seed. the canola is an asterisk that gets,
It's the redheaded stepchild.
heard.
You've been quiet, Wade.
Just staying undercover.
I didn't invite you to stay undercover. I want to hear from everybody.
Okay.
I don't grow any of these crops, so you don't want me making the rules any more than I have to.
So if you did do that, that would open up your cover crops, would be easier for growers to use, right? If you just went with the brassica specialty seed crop.
Right, then
In theory, yes.
your forage and cover folks wouldn't have to pin.
All for anyone, especially seed crop, right?
Unless you all have that covered through this non-state regulated policy.
Have what covered brassica forage.
Yeah. Would you want to? I mean, that's another approach too, right? Is you have growers who are agreeing to abide by this, but it's not state required. This would require specialty seed and you could add forage and cover to yours. I don't know if that makes sense, but that might be another option.
Is that the value chain stops there, like stops when you plant your cover crop, you know, you're not marketing that crop anymore. I don't think there's any sort of enforcement mechanism that incorporated on state regulated.
Yeah.
It could be people to comply, great.
Your experience, I've never seen what they're gonna comply. Kind about producing 5 to 8 tons of forage. No cattlemen in Pratt County is not gonna plant cover crop. That's just not. So I don't know what in my mind, I have a big question, what's the enforcement? Sort of the seed growers suing the cover crop in there because you let it go too long. That has to be defined.
So we can
I don't think they have.
move to page 10. Let's jump forward to violations. So ODA can, under these rules, we would be able to issue a notice of non-compliance and plan of correction. So Charlotte planted and violated the rules. And I send her the naughty letter and say, you agreed to spray that crop out, you agreed to till it under, you agree to get an isolation agreement with your neighbor. Your neighbor's not gonna sign it because they're pissed off at you for growing, but you know, those are kind of the options. And then if Charlotte says, well, to heck with you, Sonny, I'm not doing that. Then we say, well, you didn't comply with that, so now here's your fine. $1,000 a day for each day after the time period described in the notice of non-compliance and plan of correction. So when I send that, it would be like, you have 10 days, 15 days, and then starting day 16, here's your $1,000 fine. She says, sorry, day 17, here's another until we get to 10,000. And then she has the ability, which is true under all administrative notices, to contest that and go before an administrative law judge and argue and say, no, I did everything right and my neighbor's wrong, or whatever the case may be. But it does give us a little more teeth than we've had in the past. So that would be the compliance portion if somebody didn't follow whatever we put in the rest of the rules.
So is this in any of the other areas, or is this
This would
Again,
apply
specific?
for,
That's,
no, it would apply for, I think Willamette Valley has its own, but I think it would apply for the other two as well. The Central Oregon Protected District was the only one that required a research permit. And I don't, it was before my time at the department, I think. It was certainly before my time working on sticky wickets like this. I was out pulling pesticide samples.
So as it's written now, the department may assess 1,000 for each day. After a notice of non-compliance,
Up to 10,000.
but the department may also say, well, we're not gonna find you.
I don't feel like that would be the case. I
Can you
think
say what you
this,
just said again, Kevin? At the very
It
end,
says the department may assess $1,000 a day penalty. It doesn't say the department will, or the department is required to assess it.
yeah,
I think if there's gonna be an assessment, it has to be a mandatory. They can't may.
yeah, it should be mandatory, but it almost don't feel like 1,000 a day with up to 10,000. I've lost 2 turnip crops in the last 5 years because of isolation issues. One being a forage mix and another being canola. And depending on that 10 days, we all know how fast a brassica can bolt and go to flower. 10 days is too long. And there should be more teeth because you're talking thousands of dollars an acre and specialty brassica crops. And given our previous endeavor, it took you the ODA 7 months
right.
and still nothing happened. So this should be more of an immediate action, not 10 days. It should be more on the spot, 24 hours, because we all know how fast the brassicas respond in the spring. And
You're not gonna get that. We do not have the statutory authority to do that. That would require a change at the legislature.
well, then,
I don't have 24 hours in any enforcement at ODA.
well, no, and I get that, but there needs to be something. Because like I just stated earlier in the meeting, we went from not knowing a neighbor had a brassica in his forage mix to 2 days later, my bees are out and his whole field is blooming. It took 2 days and as soon as the flowers opened up, the damage was done in pollination. 2 days.
Meaning your bees were flying to his field.
Yeah, less than a quarter. I was pinned.
This is not going to solve that, ever.
Well, then if it's not gonna solve it, then why be here talking about it?
Well,
'Cause
because
the-
other folks asked us not to repeal the district completely. That was the other option, was to repeal the district completely and let y'all work it out amongst yourselves. And people in Jefferson County said they weren't interested in that.
Cause I guess I have a hard time seeing how working with my neighbor has benefited when you try to work with your neighbor and then they just hide behind a bankruptcy umbrella.
Yeah.
And then I'm the one that's lost crops. I don't get reimbursed at pollination. All the expenses have all incurred.
100%.
And so, you know, if there can't be something more relative, then I think this is, and you guys aren't going to enforce this at a better point. Why sit the 3 hours here to talk about it?
I appreciate that. That's perfectly
Yeah,
reasonable.
on paper.
Yep.
So depending on the forage crops, is that I don't know that that's even doable in a lot of cases, because the people that are planting those aren't even familiar with the cattle industry is not familiar with seed production or any of that, and so if they're doing a cover crop and they're in the seed business, it should be no problem. They have to pin it. That would cure that issue. You wouldn't have anybody next to you.
What kind of communication, I mean, where are they buying that forage seed mix from? And what kind of communication can we do with that dealer so that you buy this, you've got canola in there, or sorry, some sort of brassica in that mix. And here's your handout that says you better go talk to Jeremiah before you plant this. We've done similar things with Wilco and other dealers in the valley around 2,4-D and other phenoxy acid herbicides, because you whisper 2,4-D to grapes and they want to give you the finger. And so we did put shelf tags, we put information that when they sold those products, they got a handout. Make sure you go talk to your neighbors. And the number, and so in this case, it could be go talk to OSU and PIN. The number of complaints that we received after that greatly decreased. People started paying a bit more attention. You know, is it gonna get 80 degrees the day after you spray? You're gonna have a volatilization problem. You know, that kind of education. I think we could look at something like that here as well.
The seed label, we're already having to tag for blackleg, so I don't see that that's even a problem. To add a tag that says you have to notify your neighbors or.
I don't know that I can require the tag, but I think that both ODA and growers in the area can work with those dealers to make sure that that information is provided when somebody buys that seed.
Sonny, does ODA license dealers?
Yeah,
Yes.
So, again, you know, those that wanna follow the rules, follow the rules, but to your point, at least what I'm hearing is an educational effort to dealers that says if you're selling seed, cover crop seed into Jefferson County, Oregon, here's the rules that whoever you're selling to has to abide by.
Right.
So
And
it's an
get them to provide
not-
that to the grower.
It's not per se a regulatory requirement, but it is.
Elizabeth would probably tell me I can't make her folks do it, but I think that many companies are interested in not, you know, because somebody like Eric's gonna come back and say, why the hell did you sell that seed to Sunny?
Yeah.
Knowing that it's got stuff in there and we have issues in this county. I think we could work with them.
A rogue landowner is probably harder to deal with in public shame than a company is probably easier to publicly shame.
I guess,
So at the dealer, it seems to me a lot of this stuff then might get handled, could be handled at the dealer level.
if it's a local dealer.
Well, that's why,
Problem is,
again, somebody,
cover crop dealers back east.
yeah, but if they're licensed to sell in the state of Oregon, then there's a mechanism for getting them the information.
Correct.
That's all, that's, you know, again, it's,
Most dealers are not unfamiliar with voluntary stewardship measures versus sales.
Right.
That's not unusual at all.
yeah, so. Just, that, to me, that seems like a slam dunk way to solve some of this problem.
So based on the conversation, I'm hearing leave it as brassica crops. We can work with OSU and some of your associations here and the dealers to do some education outreach for those cover and forage crops of, hey, these rules have gone into effect. You need to be pinning so that at least you know who's growing what, where, which is really what these rules, I think, are gonna get you the most of. And that opportunity to have those conversations. I'm happy to help with that education piece.
And, this RAC, this rules advisory, is a somewhat official capacity, right? Can we make recommendations to ODA that are related to, but kind of on the periphery of this rule?
Depends, what are you thinking?
Can this body make a recommendation to ODA? That ODA find resources, and it could be a specialty crop block grant, so it could be federal dollars that's devoted to identifying maybe a series of kind of voluntary or private sector initiatives that could support the implementation of this and also achieve goals that are outside of the direct authority of ODA. And so that could be
Maybe,
coming up with voluntary stewardship labels. It could be incorporating the pinning requirements here into the existing non-state regulated pinning process. It could be adopting a digital pinning system so that it's a lot less cumbersome than a map with a sticker on the wall.
I'm not familiar with this. Taking your document, thank you, Jeremiah. Who runs this? I mean, but what, is this an association that OSU, does OSU just do it? Where does this come from? What group? Super League. So I think the Seagrowers League could apply for a specialty crop block grant.
Right, but this group could make that recommendation or suggestion. It would be then the responsibility of the seed growers or of some other entity that would be eligible to apply for that.
Yeah.
But the recommendation would set the stage for that private sector voluntary process to then hopefully identify resources and be implemented.
Right. I don't think you're gonna get resources directly from ODA unless it's something like the crop block grant. We are strapped beyond belief. And
I think given the size of our immediately local specialty seed industry, vegetable seed, carrot seed, I think there would be a compelling case for, can we take some of the issues that ODA is trying to address somewhat off of, or help to ensure that this is implemented effectively.
right.
And in the process, support the ongoing viability and sustainability of the crucial industry.
Yeah, and I think you could pull me and you could pull Elizabeth Savory into those conversations. And then apply for something like the specialty crop block. You know, I think that's the kind of support that ODA could provide.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for Elizabeth, but I know I would be willing to participate in those conversations. Because I think you're right, it's ink on paper, and until you do some of that education and outreach, it's not gonna get very far. So yeah, I think that's absolutely a possibility. And this is being recorded, so it is part of the public record. So if you ever wanted to point back to this conversation, you have it on recording.
I think one of the hearing Eric's comments and his frustration, it's not conceivable that this can solve all of the problems.
It's not really conceivable to really solve anything, given how fast they grow, how fast they pollinate and everything else, and then trying to go through the hoops. I started at Thanksgiving trying to work on the distance that was violated between canola and my turnips, and by May 1st, we still weren't there yet, and ODA was still sitting on their thumbs. So, how much, then the wrong 10 days is the wrong 10 days, but at that point, it's the wrong 2 days, you know.
And I think my conclusion then would be, this can't be a silver bullet for all of the problems that people face. Can it be a foundation, or can it be used as leverage to then find additional solutions and mechanisms that go a lot farther towards solving these problems?
I'm always a big fan of that. And local, you all have to live and work together, and I think that's where that needs to happen. I am hoping we can get the rest of this before the end of our time. But I really like that conversation and am really open to supporting it however I can.
So an easy one for me is, under, pending procedures, number 2, I noticed Jeremiah's sign says he closes at 4 o'clock, but it needs to be 8 to 4, not 8
I inherited that sign.
to 5. You inherited that sign.
It's a great sign if it's an hour earlier.
I paid attention to it.
Okay, so I'm hearing leave it brassica, other brassica crops, not brassica specialty seed. I think the information that's being requested is pretty consistent with probably what you're doing here, what other programs are doing.
The priority pinning is not consistent because this is based off of continuous production of the brassica seed crops. If you have 5 years of continuous production, you would have priority over someone that only has 2.
You are violating the general state rules if you have 5 years of continuous production in the same field.
Not in the same field, but just.
Well, yeah,
This is by field.
wasn't there somewhere in here by area?
Yeah.
A 3 mile radius?
Yeah, given the priority in
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going. So I'm on page 7. The bottom number 5. And I guess the question is, for my OSU partners, are you okay notifying the folks that there's a conflict? With that pin? Or do you need ODA to do that?
I think this OFU is gonna get drug into the digital age. Really, with hurry, I guess.
Well, we're happy to go digital, but that's what we've heard. I mean, Jeremiah can speak to this, but we've heard that, it's not, paper is preferred, is what we've heard. So, if folks wanna move to digital, we would be, yeah, I think we're completely fine with that, but.
I mean, for you guys, if somebody were coming to pin, you could see right on a digital map if they could or not. It would be an immediate measurement. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a difference between OSU dropping a pin on a digital map and going digital. Meaning Wade doesn't have to go online to put his pin in. That would be going digital. Wade coming in and saying, here, Jeremiah, I want to drop a pin here. And the map that Jeremiah uses happens to be digital. And then doing that 3 mile, those are 2 different things. Does that make sense to folks?
Kind of, but I still have to come here to pin.
Right. And I think what Steve's saying is, or call.
Yeah.
Jeremiah said you can call.
Right, and in that conversation, Jeremiah can say, hey, you can't pin that field because
No,
somebody
all
else.
Jeremiah's gonna do is drop a pin.
Yeah, we can't refuse a pin, but we can definitely notify.
You can notify.
Identify if there's a conflict, yeah.
Right. And then it's up to the growers to either, and this is where we're gonna get into the advisory panel and some of that, but either ODA has to have a copy of that or OSU and say, you meet the criteria for historical use and you have priority, or you don't. And then it's up to those 2 growers to either do an isolation distance agreement. Cool, he drops the pin in the field and we have an isolation distance agreement in a file folder somewhere. Or we go through this other process that either the advisory panel makes a decision, or it comes to me and I flip a coin in Salem and say, Charlotte gets it. Is kind of what I think we have laid out here. You know, if you're okay with it, it's 2.9 miles and you're like, that's good enough for me. You sign the isolation distance agreement, send a copy in to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah says, cool, and he puts the pin on the map. And everybody moves on with their life. If that doesn't happen, that's when some of these other pieces kick in.
It's a flip of the coin, but when the pinning priority date, take preference. If somebody pinned it first or had
Yeah, have a long damn line day one.
already based on.
Well, unless you've got this historical use priority.
So you'd have to merge the map that you already have, this paper map, onto, well, not onto a new digital systems, we're not even really talking about that, but into these rules. Is that what I'm hearing?
But
I can't use what's currently happening. So this would be the first year, nobody's gonna have historical priority use under this. Next year, I grew in that field last year. And you wanna grow within 3 miles. Even if I think if you try to drop a pin, and again, these are kind of loosely based on WVSSA, so tell me if I'm wrong. But I can show that I want to grow again in the field this year. I'm gonna have priority because I had it last year. Unless we agree through an isolation distance agreement.
But
What's stopping an isolate, a radius, you know, cause like we just, these are the real details. Carrie, you are where you are. I have a field that is less than a half a mile from his place. He wants to grow canola. I want to grow turnips. All right, it would be stupid of me being 7 miles away from my shop to go put my turnips a half a mile from his shop. But if I put turnips there, it would screw everything around his house. So what kind of radius are we talking? Are we talking, you know, is there a way that we could identify a radius to a shop to support other growers, you know, to fill in the gaps of isolation? Because there's some growers that, you know, span from the big plains to the small plains. So are they gonna get isolation preference all the way across
It would
the
be,
agency?
so the way it's written currently, it's 3 miles from field edge to field edge.
So if I put turnips a half mile from him and all of his ground is up around where his shop is, he wouldn't be able to do anything and I would have the right.
Correct. For the 2 years that you would have that field.
So, okay, that's why I'm asking, is there a way that we can put a radius in to the address? You know, cause
That says anything within 3 miles of your house is protected indefinitely?
yeah, because I farm on a dead end road. I can't get any more farther away from a pocket from everybody else that is doing this. But as soon as I go to venture out, I have to watch his isolation right, Jeremiah's isolation right, Bender's isolation right, everybody else's. But I can only go back into my pocket so much before now I'm eventually pushed out by everybody else that is, one, a bigger farmer, and two, has strung out isolation from here to hell and back. You know, I can only go back in my corner so much.
Yep.
You know?
And they can only plant 2 out of 5 years in that field.
Okay, well, I guess that still doesn't amount to anything, you know? When I'm trying to get away from everybody else to keep my own isolation. But I can be the dick and have a field of turnips a half a mile from his shop and screw hundreds of his acres.
Yep.
Obviously, that would be stupid on my part, but it's still going to happen. So that's why I say, is there a way that we could put a radius into this where you got a priority from your shop? Cause you know, you're talking 3 miles. Well, geez, that's pretty much from the canyon rim to Metolius. A 3 mile radius and 3 miles this way. Radius only covers half the circle.
A lot of thousands of acres tied up with a 3 mile radius.
Exactly.
A lot of, yeah.
What's it based on? What's the 3 miles based on?
What's happening in Willamette Valley right now?
I mean, there's scientific study about pollen. Do we have any idea how far brassica pollen travels?
They're using, the 3 mile came from entomology. But that bees fly 3 miles.
I see.
That's, I'm reaching way back.
That's part of it, yeah.
But my recollection, the isolation distances in the northeast crop protection district were different.
They might
than
be
the
2
isolation.
miles. Yeah, it doesn't have to be 3 miles. That was just a starting point.
Ours are 1 mile right now.
And if that is what makes sense for over here, that's absolutely what we can do.
But I guess there should be a priority of what's at home versus what is away.
So you're thinking a priority for, say, if you and I pinned hours apart for fields that are pretty close, then when it comes to the priority, flip the coin, who actually gets to grow in that area, the first check might be distance from home.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm, like you said, I'm a mile, it's half a mile from field to my house, and it's 2 miles from field to your house, then I win because it's closer to my house.
It should be part of the factoring, yes.
Well, and I think there's a couple ways that we could approach that. So we figure out what is the appropriate isolation distance, number one. Is it 3 miles? Is it 1 mile? Sounds like 1 mile over here is more what folks are familiar with.
Species and variety or type dependent.
And
So beets is 5, I think,
beets are not part of this,
but I'm telling you,
right?
I don't know what it is for brassica, but.
Yeah.
it's by species.
So we could follow whatever you're using for brassicas and include rapeseed in that and set that. And then if we get to the point where we need an advisory panel, we could tell the advisory panel, first thing you look at is how close is it to their shop? If it's closer to your shop and you're not violating plant back restrictions, you're gonna take priority.
Yeah, and we have that in the pinning, right? That's all part of the pinning is its phone number, address, the contact.
Correct.
So that address used,
You could say, because some people's mailing address is not their home address, or maybe their shop is not their, you could request that level of detail so that the advisory panel had that information. Or you could put it into the pinning part, but I think that might make it more confusing. I think if you are within the isolation distance, you can't come up with an agreement, it goes to the panel. The panel could use that as guidance for determining who has priority or who should get to grow. And personally, that's where I would put it. Let me pull up, I'm pulling up the
panel's gonna have to be people that can mobilize really quickly.
yeah, exactly. 10 days is almost too much.
You gotta have that.
This is pinning. This is not planting. You do not plant until you have the pin. If you have already planted, you are under ODA's enforcement action. So those are two different things. Just to be, sorry to be energetic about it, but those are two different things. Let's see.
See, basically
Northeast is 2 miles.
it's a lot of Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association rules. They're trying to put that into rules here.
If it makes sense. We had to start somewhere. So a little bit of what we have for the Willamette Valley, a little bit of what WVSSA has. I didn't have the local piece. But yeah, so Northeast is 2 miles. Malheur is a 3 mile wide strip, but I think that's because in Idaho, it's 3 miles on their side and we are good neighboring regulations from years ago. And currently brassica specialty seed in Jefferson County uses a 1 mile isolation among brassica specialty seed of any variety
Yeah, and radish could be up to 2
from
radish.
radish to radish, but not radish to brassica.
Correct.
Yeah. So does 1 mile make more sense for these state rules? Sounds like that's what you are all relatively used to.
Well, I know I've been denied at 2 miles. with the crops that I've grown.
Were they radish?
It was canola to turnip.
Okay, so that was under ODA's regulations. Right? No,
No, that was just in actual seeing cross pollination.
From your buyer.
But yeah,
okay,
at the seed level.
got it.
You know, I'm not a seed rep or anything, but that's, 2 miles, we had issues.
They did not want you to grow within 2
Yeah,
miles of.
yeah, it was
Kimball.
denied.
Is there a way to just keep the protected district as, but just keep this back page?
No,
Just actually have some enforcement behind the protected district?
no. There isn't. That would leave Deschutes and Crook County still under a research permit. Because we can't, the authority that we had to write that was not valid. So we can't just pull 2 counties out and leave what is currently.
But the authority was for Jefferson County.
The authority is to protect low erucic acid from high erucic acid. That other special section that the statute has.
That's where it originated.
That's what we're using here. I don't understand what they were doing before. I think they didn't talk to DOJ as closely as they could have, to be honest. Because the way that we are reading it now, we have the authority to create protected districts. We have separate authority to protect edible rapeseed using the control authority as the model. It doesn't mean that we have the control authority for canola. We have this other one that gives us the authority to protect it from high. It was all about industrial versus edible, is what I'm understanding. So we're kind of in this weird tweener of we can either do nothing and then we're stuck in this spot with research that quite frankly doesn't work and doesn't work well for me or for OSU. Or we put something like this into place so that people know what's being grown where, using that authority to protect edible varieties.
If we don't do this, we're gonna have more of the same situation that they had last year, year before. Canola just getting bought and grown. But so the whole agronomic issue of our area is driving this because somebody will come along, I get calls once a week this time of year. We need 40 trucks of canola. Can you place it? It's up to me to figure out where we can do that and how. A grower is going to have somebody in a company bigger than mine that says, hey, there's this contract out there if you want to get in on it. Grow this, and that's where we have to have. Where he's gonna have the same turnip issues. Edible seed growers are gonna have the same turnip, and the tighter the economics get in our area, the less water we have. The shorter the seasons, the drier it gets, the more you're gonna start seeing crops like this infringe on your high dollar crops. Because it's easy. And it's not easy from a regulatory, it's easy for the grower. He can make money where he couldn't before, you know, and that's gonna drive a lot of guys from put food on the table, period.
So let's talk about this advisory panel. I think this is one of the harder parts, and I don't know if it makes sense for this local area.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 9. So this is, we've got conflicting at whatever distance we end up with. No isolation agreement.
Real quick on something on the
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Jefferson County Advisory Panel, is that the same thing as the Brassica Advisory Panel?
Yes,
I think that just needs,
Brassica added.
yeah, thanks. I figured it was, but
Yep, good call. So things are broken down. We can't get an isolation agreement. We don't have a historical use priority that we can lean on. So we're gonna pull together an advisory panel. Extension service representative, a commercial rapeseed grower not party to the conflict. And nothing in here says it has to be in Jefferson County, although I think
It's gonna be Anna.
and then a commercial non-rapeseed brassica grower. And so the three will get together, they would receive information from, so to start this, you have to have both parties agree to be, that this is going to be a mediation kind of, it's not mediation, but a dispute resolution, and they agree to it. So if they both aren't willing to sign that, then neither one of you are going to grow because you're not going to have a pin. So you either agree to this panel or you say, I'm moving on to a different crop this year. Or you're subject to enforcement action if you violate that. And so you would say, it's 2 miles from my house. It makes no sense for me to grow 7 miles away because I'm driving the tractor and he's got fields closer to his house. Why the heck is he blocking me from growing? Right? And so you put that before this panel and the panel says, man, that makes sense. We're going to give the field this year to Eric. And you've agreed that you're going to abide by that. Jeremiah puts the pin in for Eric and, you know, Sunny has to wait for another time of growing a different field.
So are you looking for, so that's already in seed arbitration law? Every seed tag has it on the back, that if there's a disagreement between the farmer and the seed broker, arbitration is in there. It's written right on the seed label. So that backs up what you're saying, but I don't know that it's.
This would be, this is in Oregon rule. And so again, ODA, if you don't do this, you don't get a pin. And if you plant, then you move to the violation section.
Perfect.
Yeah. You know, you have a public meeting. Jeremiah, Wade, and Tim sit down and say, okay, here's what Eric said, here's what Sunny said. You invite Eric and Sunny to the meeting and, you know, is there anything else that you think we should know? And Eric's like, damn it, I'm not driving my tractor all over heck. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is pretty close to his house. I don't have a good reason. And the panel says, okay, we're gonna give that field to Eric. Yeah, I don't even think this would, the way she wrote it, it wouldn't even make it over to ODA. If you can't come up with a decision. Let's see. I'm just reading to make sure, because I know at one point we had talked about in the Willamette Valley, by chance. And there's air quotes around by chance because that turns into flipping of a coin.
Well, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but another thing kind of based off the same topic, we were talking, Kara was mentioning earlier, is the timing of it. You know, you're trying to figure out a decision in September, whether you're gonna plant it. I already gotta be planted in late August on my isolation, so.
That's why there has to be a date for final end date for pinning.
Well, yes, no, I get that. But if he's still deciding in September, I've already been planted and we're already planted, now we're on.
Then he
page
can't get a pin
10.
because he's past that end date. So
So-
that we have to set that end date where people know, okay, everybody has their pins in or not by this date.
Yes, understood, but
And then if he decides in September, he's past that end date, he can't put a field in. So that's why we have to have those end dates. is all pins have to be established for crop
But
year.
then Eric wouldn't have planted his field in August unless he had a pin.
Right.
So you wouldn't have spent the dollars and time to go plant the field if you didn't have a pin.
Which is why I think we have that pin date set as June 21st, is so that everybody knows, okay, I have that field.
Mhm.
So I don't think it makes sense to push it out until September or November.
I don't think so either, but you know, based off of the decision, water's number one dragon around here.
NOAA puts out recommendations a couple months in advance.
Yeah, I don't think any of us aren't projecting a year in advance now.
It's gonna be a bad,
And going back to that, what stops somebody from coming in there and putting all their pins down early, just in case?
Well, we have,
Somebody plants like, he plants and gets his pin, but I'm not gonna make any decisions probably till the 1st September at the earliest for what I'm gonna do, if I'm gonna do anything at all. So,
That gives you time to negotiate with him.
but if he's already got the pin, it's done.
well, I think that's why going back
But
to
I'm
page,
saying is I can go back into June and pin everything that I think hypothetically I'm gonna need, and my ground is all over the place.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get back to all the other issues.
so going back
it's
to,
almost like you gotta have an end date, then an awarding date, all before anything gets planted, because I might be pinned, but you know, I might go into an unwanted discrepancy with my neighbor over that pin and their pin. So it's almost like you gotta have, yeah, an end date and then an award date of, yeah, hey, you won, you got your pin, there was no conflicts, or hey, there's a conflict, this needs to be settled by X date.
so going back to page 6. So the map resets June 21st. I think that's, and Kenny, I'm gonna look at you because you guys deal with this. And I imagine Jeremiah, you deal with it in your brassica seed pinning. That, so your map resets June 21st. I don't understand the pin is only valid until the following dates. So if the annuals and the biannuals, can you explain how that works with what your association does?
Yeah, so, if you have a spring priority, you have to have it pinned by March 1st. Don't have it pinned by March 1st, someone can come in and take that isolation. Biennials, it's August 1st, and then just the map resetting is just a function of clearing out pins on a digital map. So if a priority was there, spring priority was there from like 2025, it would clear out on June 21st, 2026. Just so you don't see it on digital map anymore.
So really looking at number 6 on page 6, yeah, it's the only 6 there. That really is a pin priority is only valid until March 1st for your annuals and August 1st. So
You have to repin that amount of time.
so if I pinned August 1st of 25, or even September 1st of 25, my pin is good really until June 21st, but that field is allowed to grow that crop until August 1st. Is that right?
Your pin would be good till August 1st, and it would clear out in 27. Yeah. The resetting map thing shouldn't even be on here, because it's just like a software. It's just a software quirk. It's just how we have to keep the map clean, because you can't pull up the map and see everyone's pins from 1998 to 2025.
Okay, so going back to number 6, a pin priority. So I pin by August 1st. That pin is good until the following August.
Right.
And so if anybody wanted to grow. So I'm here. And I pinned for crop year 27 by August 1st. But I don't plant until January. If somebody else wants to come grow in December, they can't do that because I pinned by August 1st. Even though I haven't planted.
Well, that's a different issue. That depends on how you guys want, how Central Oregon wants to do it. Cause that's a biennial crop, so you'd have to have a winter season, but
Okay, so maybe that's a bad example, but.
I mean, our pinning maps are basically. We get our maps in March and. That map is valid for crops that would be harvested the following year, so the map that we got.
The crop year would be the next calendar year.
They're pinning for 27 harvesting crops.
Right. How do you determine what that last day is?
You've never really had a last day, it's all based off of the kind of the priority pinning.
when's your pinning day?
Varies for different crops. Brassicas is in. I think. Oh, that was in February, actually,
So that's kind of your deadline.
that's precedence pinning, non-precedence pinning is anytime after March 15th.
So if I want to establish my priority for the following crop year, I have to have a pin in with you by February.
No, it's not federal. It's, if you want,
That's priority.
it's just priority. So you can come in and place your pins if you have priority by anytime after February 15th. If you don't have priority, you can start placing your pins anytime after March 15th.
And
Well,
priority is I
if Carrie
planted
wanted-
last year.
Yeah, or continuous crops, but so like Carrie could come in and take our map from this year if you wanted to plant in the fall. You could come and pin in September and plant 2 weeks later.
As long as there is
So
a,
what if you don't? So I'm just playing devil's advocate, I never do this, but what if I went pin all around there and I don't plant anything, maybe 5 acres? And then the poor neighbor that needs to plant something, can't do it because I have it, and I decided to do something else with the field.
Well, technically, it's the grower that's responsible for pinning, and so if plans change, then I guess they would be responsible for.
And wouldn't
Who's
that,
notifying
that separation zone is 380 miles from the field, right?
field edge to field edge.
So if you only planted 5 acres, that takes that 3 miles down considerably. Like you almost have
People
to.
have, just like what you said, you know, one place that I have, another place I have that I own is 10 miles away, and another place is 20 miles away, so that would just take up so much different areas and really kind of screw up other farmers, and I'm just saying, you know, I think it's something to address.
How do you avoid that with what you have currently?
You don't pin when there's a pin on it. So there's a priority to it, right? So there's a pin, that space that you might want to plant would be considered unopened.
And how
So
do
The
you,
map conflicts are resolved before they're actually pinned,
right?
so we don't have mean date.
Can we incorporate what you have there into these rules? Would that work for people?
How often have you changed the dates? When you incorporate in a rule, it's permanent. Yes,
In theory, yeah.
so
I think that's been revised in at least 14 years.
If it's been that long, because our, things are changing, when we're planting is changing and all that, so if that's been that long, unchanged. That
Maybe
might
that
cure a
counts.
lot of problems. In the rule.
Could the rule just be, grass doesn't need to be trimmed according to the rules of the
No.
seed association?
No, because then if they change them, we can't do that. It has to be incorporated. But if people are comfortable and used to that, I can probably take a lot of what is there and put it in here. And then we decide, is it 2 miles? Is it 3 miles? And then do you have some sort of way to resolve conflicting pins beside the pins already there?
Seniority. You have to delegate seniority for the new growers. So, like you'd have seniority of where your home place is, but then it's.
There's a resolution process, I think, to your question.
Sounds like the problems are solved before they become problems.
Right. And we could still have some of this, isolation distance agreement on top of what you have in here if people were comfortable with that. I know you have
So
thought
what
there.
you guys, putting this in the rule. Adds teeth to both. Is that, am I on track thinking that way? Cause now you have your seed association rule in the permanent ODA rule.
Doesn't the permanent ODA, like what you just referred to, just affect brassica?
We would only be adopting the brassica portion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it wouldn't transpire to all crops, I wouldn't think.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. But it would be maybe more consistent if we had fairly comparable, brought as much of that language over. And then had a little bit more of an opportunity, and maybe we don't need it if everybody's comfortable with that. And if you're not following that, then now there's both whatever your seed association does to say you screwed up and the violation portion of these rules.
I would think the closer the two are aligned,
Right.
makes for a lot less confusion of,
That's kind of what I was trying to get
"Hey,
at.
what am I gonna do," kind of thing. So. If the Jefferson seed growers. Live with those rules, then it would make sense to take the brassica parts of their program and incorporate it.
I think the biggest change would be bringing those forage and cover crop folks under the fold that are not captured here. And then we could start that education and outreach and working with dealers piece on top in our local seed presser. So if folks are comfortable with that, I want to do this right, not fast, which sounds really ironic given how long we've been talking about this,
10
but
years, just 10 years.
for you, Gary, not for me. Longer for some in the valley. You're doing really good, Anna.
We appreciate you being here.
I would like to get a copy of that from Jeremiah and see how we can incorporate it into this. If you're comfortable with it, we could host a virtual meeting in a few weeks and just see, I'll send another copy, another draft out to folks and see if that incorporation makes sense. If you want me to come back in person, I can do that too. I'm happy to drive back over, whatever makes the most sense for you. I know you're all starting to get into some really busy time though. And I want to be sensitive to that, so,
Do you bring rain each time you come?
Yeah.
do the rain dance.
Over as much as you want.
Exactly.
I guess,
Well, I guess based off of what you just said, you wanna do it right, not fast, but 27's right around the corner and I'm wanting to get ready to pen two and. that's why
100%.
I totally feel that we should have, when incorporating, some of the stuff from the seed league or whatever you wanna call it, there should be a pen deadline of no more future pens, and then everything should be rewarded. Or looked over, reviewed, pen conflicts, and then an awarding deadline.
Okay.
Because, you're gonna be significantly later than me, yet we're neighbors.
What do others think about that?
economically, it makes sense. Brassicas are such a quick and short crop. If you don't have that decision, they'll be in his situation across the valley here. It's Wright County.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Even if the shoots was kept in the rural, everybody's gonna have the issue. So, yeah.
Do we think that there's a way to incorporate what you have currently and that piece? We're all tired of sitting here. I know you all are not sitters.
So these rules, in my mind, rules that they have been around forever. It's the rules we rely on. Okay, so putting that in there is, it actually should have probably been written in originally that way.
Probably,
They didn't exist.
The experienced areas
yeah.
should have been their existing rules that are all the conflict has been, for the most part, litigated out of them. And now we have ODA addressing the new problem. Let's use the rule, or use this seed association way of figuring it out.
Maybe I missed something can I ask why Crick and the shoots are being excluded from this in this new draft?
Yep. Crick County asked not to be included. So if folks remember, we were going to repeal the district completely. And then there were conversations from folks to the powers that be that didn't want it completely repealed. Deschutes County doesn't seem to have the same kind of conflict that is happening in other places. And Crook County said, can't we just do this ourselves? And I said, sure, if that's what you would like to do. And they said, that's what we would like to do. But Jefferson County said, no, we still want some rule in place from the state.
So Crook County is looking for crop choice. We don't want to limit crop choice. We felt that between the seed dealers and the contracts were written, that those individuals kind of control their own isolation issues. So that ought not to be an ODA issue, that's a market issue. And let the market work the way the market wants to work. But it, in large part, focused on crop choice as we get into these, again, the drought years. We not as badly as Jefferson County, but have been limited on a lot of our water. And with the droughts that we seem to be cycling through, we can't grow the same specialty crops that Jefferson, our climate is not. You guys have 30, 45 more growing days than we do. So we don't have the choices. And we just need to find some choices.
But in that previous version of the district, their language like crop choice.
Yeah.
In this proposed version. I that if Eric wanted to plant turnips in Crook County, he effectively couldn't, because there's no way to identify if he's gonna have isolation. So by not adopting this rule, you're actually limiting crop choice.
Well, we have lots of livestock producers already growing turnips as forage crop that probably have never ever gone through any pinning process, haven't gone through any notification process. Again, that gets back to the forage issue versus seed production. We don't have the seed production stuff going on, so.
Forage and brassica currently can be grown, but are not allowed to flower.
Right.
In the current district.
Really, as this is written, there's really no limitations on what you just said. Adhere to function.
Just a different approach. And again, trying to make it appropriate for the local community.
The way that Shutes County, when I had to go get basically a director's exemption from ODA to grow canola. You go to Hampton, we've got 3 pivots that would put us over the 500-acre limit, so we had to get a director's exemption to be able to grow canola.
There's no acre limit. It's the research permit
Right.
that you had to get.
Yeah, and so taking Deschutes County out of it, there's no carrot growers in Hampton. It's too hot, too cold. We can get it done quick and in a hurry, and we don't have a fallow here, so that was the attraction. We can grow crop on crop on crop. There's never a fallow. So the way that Deschutes County is shaped, we can plant the stuff far away from any seed production. So taking Deschutes County out is been a long time coming.
So we're at time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Besides the rain dance, which is your preference, in person or virtual? Because I think we need to have another meeting with an updated version of these rules.
I would guess throw out if Jeremiah would host us, those that are local could come again, meet and utilize the technology in this room. And then you guys in Salem could zoom in and save a little gas mileage and still maybe have a productive meeting, but I think there's more value, the more face-to-face we have, the better product we have. Cause I tend to zone out on Zoom meetings and I'm just not as focused as,
Okay.
that's my problem with.
And like I said, I'm happy to come back. It gets me out of the office.
I think your latter point is far superior on, being face to face. Definitely keeps you from zoning and being, or distracted in other things, technical difficulties, regardless of where you might be,
Yeah.
even though it might be kind of a pain.
I can't remember what you told me for days that this room might be available or you were available.
Just, yeah, you can get the calendar. Yeah.
So it looks like I could do May 6th or 7th or 8th. That's that first full week.
Now you're talking
Yeah. Let's start there.
wide open.
Yeah. What is, so Wednesday, May 6th, Thursday, May 7th, or Friday, May 8th, do any of those days have major conflicts for folks? Oh, that's right. Can we,
I'm out of town as well.
okay. What about, let me look at the next week. I could do earlier in the day, Thursday the 14th or Friday the 15th is wide open. What does that look like for folks? It's Friday afternoon. Okay, let's do that. Let's do Friday the 15th and we'll do from 1 to 3 again. Unless folks want earlier in the day because it's a Friday. We got here by, I don't know.
Fridays don't exist that time of the year for us.
I fully understand. I think we got here by 11. Yeah, so we could do earlier. You could all bring a lunch if you want and get you back out. If that's easier, or is it better to be later in the day?
Why are you looking at me?
Noon.
You're like
Noon it is.
noon, okay,
Perfect.
noon to 2 on May 15th. And tomorrow morning I will send another calendar invite. And then I will do my damnedest to get you all an updated version no later than that Monday.
So can we put on the agenda? I'd like to have a little, all I heard here was, about the digitizing, putting it on an online format. There was a lot of, I didn't hear anything positive about the paper. All I heard was negative about the paper. I want
Sure.
to.
Yeah, I think, I'm hoping that, an updated version, if folks have a chance to look at it beforehand, we can get through that and then maybe have, 20 minutes at the end that we can talk about paper versus digital. That works for folks.
I could log on the WGS stamp and show the CCIA version. If
Sure.
you guys wanted.
Okay,
So from the standpoint of language cleanup for the next one, I noticed a lot of stuff references OSU Extension Service, and as Jeremiah pointed out, it's probably
research
OSU
station.
co-arc.
Yep.
I don't know the appointments anymore of all the folks here, but I don't know if any of them have official extension time, and so it might make, since it's in rule, it might make funny associations, so the appropriate.
Yeah, we'll get that
association
updated,
With co-arc and
100%. Okay, we only went 15 minutes over.
Do you have an extension? Wait,
not officially, no.
I'm the only guy.
It's part of, like, I think it's 20% of my salary comes from extension, so I don't, whatever.
Yeah, just under the level.
But everyone should. It might just be clear to have a designee from co-arc as opposed to a designee from OSU Extension Service. Agreed.
I will admit, I see research station and I just kind of lump it all under extension in my head.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why we ended up where we did. But we will certainly make that
Well, a
correction.
lot of places you work with have joint locations.
Yeah.
This one kind of does and doesn't. Yeah.
Okay. See you all on the 15th. Thank you.
Appreciate you doing this.
You bet. And I appreciate everybody having the hard conversations. It's not easy.
They need to be had.